Well, I'd like to say at the outset what I based my update on, because you speak to in the opposition, I can call it, or the dissident media, that dissident in the sense that they do not agree with the Washington narrative. There is a consensus of where we stand on Kursk and how the war is going, which is based on the sources they are using. And many of these sources are back channels. They are acquaintances, friends, contacts of some outstanding analysts in Russia or close to Russia. Let us be honest, the overwhelming proportion of commentators on Russian events are not Russia specialists. I don't mean to say that I'm the only Russian specialist, but I'm one of the few Russian specialists who has the freedom to open his mouth. That's to say, many of my peers, people who are trained, who either were originally Russians and teaching in the West, and so the question of the language skills is clear. They're perfect. They're perfect speakers, and they understand everything that's being said. Then you have a lot of Westerners who, for one reason or other, took an interest in Russia and Eastern Europe and became fluent or skilled in the languages. These people, academics, they're nearly all academics, they don't dare open their mouths or they'll be fired. Let's be open about it. It's not that they're stupid. It's not that they necessarily disagree with anything that I'm saying. It's they're not in a position to say it themselves. There is a witch hunt on anyone who says anything contrary to the Washington narrative that things are going great and Russia will be smashed. So that's the opening point. So where are these people who really are not gifted in language, but have very good analytical skills? Where are they getting their information from? Where is it that everyone else who's appearing on the internet and whom you see in today's YouTube, where are they getting it from? Where is McGregor getting it from? Where is Scott Ritter getting it from? Where is Larry Johnson getting it from? They're all getting it from friends, contacts in the backstage in Russia. People whom they've met when they've traveled there. Ritter was several times in Russia. Most recently, I think, was in the early start of this year when he went down to Chechnya and embraced Kadyrov and met with one of his commanders, this Aldonov. Now, these people are very proud that they have these contacts and these sources of information that you, Mr. Friedman, do not have. However, they are in no position to really judge what they're getting. And between you and me, why would Mr. Aladonov give to Mr. Scott Ritter some militarily valuable information? He's a patriot. He's a professional soldier. You don't do that. I've heard him on television. I've heard him on Russian television. And he always was very, very careful in choosing his words and frankly never gave the audience anything of real use. So why would he give Scott Ritter something of use? Sorry, it doesn't stand to reason. So I'm not criticizing Mr. Ritter. I'm just looking at the facts as they are. Well, he says one thing and I'm saying something different because I'm not using those sources. I haven't met with Aldon. I haven't met with, but what am I using? I'm using open sources. Let me surprise your audience. Russia is a free society. They have less censorship than we have in France, ask Mr. Macron. We have less censorship than they have in Germany. Russia is, comparatively speaking, an open press. And in the open press, a lot of smart people, and also some stupid people, say what they think. Well, I use that, and it's my job to sort out who are the smart people and who are the stupid people. That's on my conscience. But I'm using, for example, when you look at my blogs or articles, and look at what I'm saying to other major interviewers, I'm relying on what I find in the most authoritative Russian talk shows or panelists, and on the more serious literature that is periodical. So that's where I'm coming from. And some things that I'm seeing now leave me, strange to say, or sad to say, with a much less optimistic and rosy view of how the Russian conflict in Kursk, for example, is going than what you'll hear if you pick up any of these people I've mentioned on today's YouTube.
Okay. So tell us then, what is your assessment of the situation right now?
Well, I would be dishonest if I said it's my assessment. I'm giving you an assessment of people whom I take very seriously and who are occupying a special space in Russian media. If you turn on Russian news, you won't learn much. You'll learn about how they're helping the 2,000 people who've been evacuated, but they won't tell you what's going on the battlefield. I heard last night something about what's going on the battlefield with someone who's very well prepared by his career as a military officer and a high government official. And what he's saying is that things are bad. This is not walking through the rose garden, and they are prepared for an American preemptive strike. Let me give you one or two dots. You know, there are two American aircraft carrier task forces in the Mediterranean. Russians are saying, hey, they're not there for Iran. They're there for us. Well, let me give you another dot to link. You know that 2 or 3 months ago, there's a lot of talk about how the Ukrainians had, with drones, destroyed 2 important early warning radar systems in the south of Russia. And nobody could make any sense of it. Hey, why were the Ukrainians doing this? It doesn't have any relevance to Russian strikes on Ukraine. You bet it doesn't. But it has a lot of relevance to prevent potential U.S. first strike, nuclear strike against Russia. Okay, that's where we are today. And the Russians are preparing for it. You and Britain should pay special attention, because aside from Washington, they are talking openly on the television about wiping Great Britain off the face of the map. You are among the most active people against them right now. You are spearheading the action in court. It's your challenge. Thanks.
Sorry, Gilbert. Sorry.
Yeah, right. So I stopped there, but I made my point that the situation is much more serious than one would believe if you just tune into YouTube and see what Mr. McGregor is telling you.
Yeah, now one of my questions actually was going to be on these attacks on supply chain bridges in Russia, because I hear that Russian officials have directly linked the UK with those attacks. Can you just give us an update on what those attacks were and the implications for the conflict?
Britain is implicated by the Russians and by itself, by your own prime minister, when he boasted that Challenger 2 tanks are now rolling in Russian territory. That is the first thing that they have against Britain. The Storm Shadow missiles are number 2. That is, Zelensky has been asking for them. We can assume that they've already been shipped to Moldova, to Romania, and ready to be moved in to Ukraine, or just mounted on F-16s that fly from Moldova into Ukrainian airspace and pretend that they are Ukrainian planes. The Storm Shadow is a vicious weapon, a very dangerous weapon. The Russians have mastered it a bit, but you never can bring down 100% of what's coming at you. And it has a long range, the potentially long range, depending on the variant sent to Ukraine. However, again, let me put this in context so you see why the situation is quite alarming. The Storm Shadow will not reach the Russian airplanes. This is what Mr. Zelensky says. Oh, I need them to attack the air bases from which the Russians are flying to me. Wrong. The Russians are not done. They have moved all of their long-range bombers way back, beyond any potential range of F-16 launched Storm Shadows. But what would the Storm Shadows do? They could devastate Russian factories. They could create havoc in civil society and cause strife within Russia. They could do that. But Mr. Putin will not let that happen. He will sooner attack Britain with tactical nuclear weapons than he will let that happen. And Mr. Starmer should take notice. Britain doesn't want to listen to these things, but they better.
Yeah, no, this is very, very alarming what you're saying here, Gilbert. Now, tell us about because you did write a Substack, which is kind of related to what you're saying here. And basically, it seems that America, aren't they? Well, you tell me in your own words about these air-to-ground stealth missiles that America could be supplying Ukraine.
Well, there are several different long-range, high-precision weapons. Storm Shadow is one of them. Then this JASSM is the one that's being talked about most right now. The Russians say it's probably been shipped to Moldova. just awaiting to be mounted on F-16s and used against them. As I've said, that has a 900-kilometer maximum range. That's pretty good. That could reach Moscow, but it cannot take out the Russian planes because they, as I said, they're not stupid. They've moved them beyond the range of the chassis. But the Russians have made it clear that if this missile is mounted on F-16s, watch out. We're just next to World War III because we will attack you. You meaning NATO and meaning the continental United States. And these are not phony red lines.
And do you think, I mean, how concrete is it that America are going to supply these air-to-ground missiles?
You have to ask Jake Sullivan and Tony Blinken. Behind the puppet, Mr. Biden, and the empty vessel, Kamala Harris, there are a few people who are really pulling the strings. And Mr. Jake Sullivan is one of them. Who he has as his allies in the Pentagon, I don't know, but he obviously does have them. Otherwise, these weapons wouldn't be shipped because they do indicate a vector towards World War III. Timing, it's going to happen before November 4th. The people who are now in power in the States cannot risk losing the election. They cannot even, because then they become lame ducks. And making a war on Russia is not feasible as a lame duck. It is feasible until November 4th. Therefore, with the problems that I'm sketched out are immediately before us.
And how is that election, that US election, perceived, do you think, in Russia? Is there hope, for example, that if Trump gets in, actually this all could be resolved? Or is there a more cynical view of America and, you know, it's all very well changing administration, but essentially this is the long-term strategy for America. How is it perceived in Russia?
Well, I may surprise you. on one of the most authoritative talk shows, Vyacheslav Nikonov, who's a member of the Duma, a very serious politician, a Kremlin insider, the grandson of Molotov, one of the Bolshevik founders. He said, "Hey, we want Kamala to win, because if she follows the policies that she set out in her acceptance speech, the United States is doomed." The United States will be economically destroyed by its own measures. And so, as strange as it may sound to you, the Kremlin is now repeating what its position was in 2020. In 2016. They didn't want Trump to win because he was a loose cannon on the deck. He was unpredictable. He was a volatile personality, and they didn't know what to expect. With Biden in this up to now in the election until he was replaced, they knew very well what to expect. And with Kamala, since she's as manipulated by the handlers as Biden was, they know what to expect. And they can prepare for it, as they're now doing.
Right. Okay. So they actually... So you're saying now they still, again... They don't want Trump? Because, I mean, Trump is talking about peace, isn't he?
Well, he's talking about peace. The situation is changing, and don't believe anything that the Russians are saying and whom they place their bets on. They could be saying this just to achieve the opposite result, because they were nailed in 2020 with the Russia, that all of the accusations against Russia as being behind and manipulated. So for tactical reasons, they could be saying and having a joke among themselves that they back Kamala.
Right.
But as regards Mr. Trump, I personally think this is a very different Trump, and not because of the assassination attempt, but because, having been around Washington long enough, he's putting together a formidable team, and that's what was lacking completely in his first presidency. Yesterday, we heard Tulsi Gabbard give her backing to Trump. And these are leading Democrats after Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He never could assemble such heavyweights, serious politicians who could be good in the cabinet when he first ran for president.
The Freeman Report and James Freeman on today's News Talk Radio, TNT.